Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon.
Pumped up on Mars, juice, and ketamine.
He is the Thomas Edison plus of our age.
Probably his whole life is from a position of insecurity. I feel for the guy.
I would say 98% really appreciate what he does, but those 2% that are nasty, they are out there in full force.
We are meant for great things in the United States of America, and Elon reminds us of that.
We don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, April 8th. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. Now, here at Bloomberg, the news has been dominated by last week's tariff announcements. They've upended markets, sparked hoarding of imported olive oil and iPhones, and created the first major policy rift between Musk and President Donald Trump. All the CEOs in America, Musk, the White House first buddy, has arguably been the loudest critic of Trump's tariffs, like calling Trump's trade architect a, quote, total moron, kind of loud. A very dangerous game here with very high stakes. So we'll get into what the tariffs mean for Musk's many businesses, and then talk about the political fallout and the potential beginning of the end for Doge. As always, I'm joined by our regulars, Dana Hull and Max Chafkin. Dana, hello there.
Hey.
Hey, and Max, how are you?
Hey, David. How you doing?
Excellent. Okay, and Craig Trudell, our global auto czar, is on to talk tariff nitty-gritty. Craig, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And later on, Nancy Cook, a senior reporter in Washington, will hop on to talk politics with us. Before we talk tariffs for 1 second, Max, I listened to the debut last week of your new podcast.
Did you? Wow.
Everybody's Business. Thought it was great.
Yeah, Everybody's Business. We had our first episode on Friday. If you didn't listen, it is a weekly show in which myself and Stacey Vanek Smith, who's a wonderful financial journalist, longtime reporter, talk through the news of the week and what it means. It's going to be in this feed, the Elon Inc. feed, every Friday for the next few weeks. And then eventually, if you like it, we'll move to our own feed and you can subscribe. And we did get into the tariff talk last week in a big way.
All right. There are other things to talk about besides Everybody's Business, like the tariffs, Craig Trudell. They were announced last Wednesday, shocked, I think, just about everybody. Markets collapsed, Tesla stock collapsed, everybody up in arms. I will note here as we record Tuesday morning, markets are rebounding a little bit, but still a whole lot of anxiety out there. Craig, tell us exactly how you expect this to affect the price of Tesla vehicles and how it will affect their operations.
Well, so I think we should start by talking about, acknowledging the fact that Tesla does sort of lay claim to having the most, sort of American-made cars. And they do this in large part. There's an annual study that this group at cars.com does. It's called the American Made Index. They look not just at the final assembly locations for vehicles, but also parts content. And I think, I've sort of actually taken a closer look at the most recent index that cars.com released. One of the things that I found so interesting is that one of the ways that one of the inputs for this data is actually from a U.S. law where they include Canadian content along with U.S. content as a measure of Americanness. That speaks to just how crazy the last, few weeks have been for this industry, that, it was a given that, in the past and since 1994, when you look at, a window sticker on a car for what percentage of the parts content for that vehicle is quote unquote made in America, Canada gets thrown in there. That speaks to just how international this industry is.
Well, and it also, I suppose, speaks to how, of course, America is more than the United States. It's America in the broadest sense of America. Yeah, and it was just It is.
What is America, David?
What is America? Canada was always just assumed it was just part of us. It was all just one big market. And this trade war is so vast that even that is very, very, very much in doubt.
Yeah, it's up in the air. And so, I think while Tesla, was coming into this trade war from a sort of relative point of strength in the fact that, the vehicles that they sell in the U.S., they make in the U.S., they don't entirely have a U.S. supply chain. And they acknowledged that themselves back in March. In March 11th, they sent a letter to the Trump administration where they said, even with the aggressive localization of their supply chain, there are certain parts and components that are, in their words, difficult or impossible to source within the United States. And in instance of there not being any winners in this trade war for the auto industry, that there may be sort of, relative losers in terms of who's losing the most. But Tesla absolutely is being hit by this. And I think there's also real concern about sort of second order effects here, that when the U.S. puts tariffs on other parts of the world, that Tesla will be sort of caught up in the crossfire, that they will be targeted as a result of these tariffs.
Yeah, and especially if China, I think the big thing to think about with regards to Tesla is, on the one hand, they have really worked very hard to localize their supply chain in every country where they sell vehicles. But on the other hand, they are very exposed in China, which accounts for roughly 20% of their sales. And if the trade war escalates with China, you could see this big knockoff effect where the Chinese government encourages people to not buy Teslas and to buy domestic suppliers.
Conventional wisdom around tariffs and Tesla has been that, like Craig is saying, that it's going to be the least big loser among car companies. I have to say, as I've watched Elon Musk react to these tariffs,
it's giving you reason to doubt.
I am wondering how much we should credit this Cars.com list in the first place. And, looking at the methodology, it seems like they count the number of parts and then divide how many of those parts come from the U.S.
Is it the same mathematical formula they use to set the tariffs?
It just sounds, I'm just saying, are we sure that there are not big unknown vulnerabilities in Tesla's supply chain that maybe people are not considering or underrating? Battery components in particular, that is a business that China has long dominated. I know that Tesla has battery making in the US, but I have to say, watching Elon Musk react to this stuff, it does not look like a guy who's operating
loudly,
from a position of strength.
Right. I see. So certainly very possible. I mean, his protestations have indeed been very, very loud. But Craig, I'm going to go back to the beginning and the first question I asked you, because you tap danced around it. You can't trick me, pal. Are their car prices going up already? And if not, how soon do we expect them to go up, if at all?
We have not seen Tesla make moves to its vehicle prices on its website. And I do think that will be something that we ought to watch over the next, few weeks, in the sense that they are very different from the rest of the industry, right? Where the manufacturers' suggested retail prices, tend to be kept pretty static by the rest of the industry. Other automakers, they don't, sort of mess around with MSRPs. Tesla is very different in that, and we saw that coming out of the pandemic, right? Or early on in the pandemic, we saw them jack up prices in this is very open way, along with the rest of the industry, where because everybody was production constrained.
Let me pause there for a second. So you're saying that when we had the last major supply shock, which is essentially what this is, these tariffs are a supply side shock, Tesla was the first and the most aggressive in jacking up prices of the major automakers?
I think they were both aggressive in the way that they moved, but also just much more open, where because they don't have a dealer base, because they don't have dealers and independent retailers who in the end get to go with the manufacturer's suggested retail price or not, they set their own prices, and they do so very openly for everyone to see on their website. And so they're unique in that, just as Musk is loud in the way he protests and the way he does virtually everything, Tesla is very loud in how they set their prices. I also think, whereas other manufacturers may have, no choice but to jack up prices, I do wonder how much, sort of ability Tesla has to use pricing power, given the fact that they really, have started from such a hole in terms of, the first quarter delivery numbers that they reported last week were awful. And, they were off of a awful base a year ago. So for them to start the year by saying, we expect to return to growth, they've really got to sort of, move the metal this year. And will we see them keeping pricing steady and eating these tariffs more so than other car makers?
Okay. We are going to leave the tariff side of this for here, at least the mechanical and the nitty-gritty side of the tariff side here. Craig Trudell, as always, sir, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, and by the way, Craig, shout as soon as you see price increases if you do see them.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Awesome, man. Okay, we're now joined by Nancy Cook, a senior correspondent for us in Washington. Nancy, hello.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now, so Nancy, as I got to say, it seems as I watched the eeksing and the posting on social media, it seems to be getting pretty hot and heavy right now between Elon Musk and several members of the Trump inner circle, in particular with one, Peter Navarro. Navarro, of course, helped steer Trump to these very aggressive tariffs. Musk is dead set against them. Tell us, how do you see this playing out, and what does it look like up close and personal there in D.C.?
Well, so I think that what is happening is that Elon Musk's time in the White House is coming to an end. And, he is going to leave, roughly at the 130-day mark. How the White House counsel's office kind of calculates that is still up for grabs, but we're expecting him to leave around May or June. He has driven a lot of White House aides nuts and has stepped on a lot of toes. And I think, now that Trump is also previewing that he's going to be leaving, I just think that things that were happening behind the scenes are sort of spilling out into the open a bit more. And
when you say he's driving members of the inner circle nuts, who and exactly how is that playing out? What does that look like?
So what has happened is that I think people have been very cautious around him. A lot of Trump sort of people in the White House, but also advisors and allies around him have been very cautious.
When you say cautious, you mean like fearful?
Fearful, exactly. That's a good word. Better word. They have been fearful to criticize Musk because he was like Trump's BFF for a long time and sort of still is around all the time. He was at Mar-a-Lago. He was kind of like living down there, but also in D.C. He was on Air Force One all the time. He had given so much money to the campaign. And it was funny because I would make all these calls to, Trump people when Elon first really showed up in the White House and was doing all these Doge cuts, and people were so fearful to kind of say anything negative about him, even on background. And I do think that has changed a little bit. They take their cues from the president. I think, President Trump still is, I think, on pretty good terms with Elon, but is starting, I think, to see that he is becoming a little bit of a political liability. And Trump himself has sort of said Elon is going to be leaving. Like, this is not a permanent thing. And so the aides are taking their cues from him.
So, Nancy, when you say your sources, people close to Trump, were so fearful of Elon, they wouldn't even, talk about him or throw shade, I should say, at him on background. They're doing so now?
I think they're not as fearful as they once were. They are tired of him. He has worn out his welcome. They lost that key state Supreme Court race.
Remind our listeners a little bit about that for a minute.
So I think Elon's been driving people in the White House crazy for months. And, all these Doge things were, viewed as things that he sort of did without vetting them with the White House, sort of went ahead and charged ahead. And so a real test case of his standing in Trump world was with this, state Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin. Elon was out there campaigning the weekend before. He raised a bunch of money to try to, in the race to back his candidate, and they lost. And it was, an embarrassment. And I do think Trump world right now, like the people immediately around Trump are very political people. And so that is led by his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, who is like a longtime political operative. Trump calls her the ice maiden. She looks sort of grandmotherly, but do not fall for that. She is a tough woman. Trump loves her. The family loves her.
And she's really into as a political person, she's really into message discipline. And I think that, and running a disciplined political operation. And the thing that people need to learn very quickly about Elon is he is not disciplined. I mean, he will post at all hours. He will wildly careen from one position to another. He will be off message. He will be at odds with the Trump administration. And you're seeing that play out in real time today with what he's saying about Peter Navarro, who is the lead person along with Letnick on this whole tariff issue. So that's got to be causing more consternation internally.
Yeah, Max, as Dan is saying here, Musk was out this morning hammering Navarro, hammering him.
I don't even know if I could say some of these. I believe he called Peter Navarro Peter Retardo.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
He called him a total moron.
No. Truly a moron.
Truly a moron, excuse me.
And that what he says here is demonstrably false. He also says, apparently, that he is dumber than a sack of bricks. So, yeah, I'm guessing that Susie Wiles ain't loving that.
I want to point out that I believe it was a week ago or a week and a half ago, Elon Musk was in a cabinet meeting wearing a hat that said Trump was right about everything.
That was different than the cheesehead hat? That wasn't the cheesehead?
Yeah, it was not shaped like a wedge of cheese. It was shaped like a normal baseball cap. So huge difference there. So Dana is right. Elon Musk, he's an impulsive guy. I think the inciting thing here, beyond just the tariffs and the fact that is hurting his business, but we know for a fact that Elon Musk is willing to accept some pain, some business pain on behalf of Donald Trump. But Navarro went on, I can't remember I think it was CNBC, and he was asked a question about this, and he said that Tesla is not an American auto manufacturer, it's an American assembler.
Yeah, just a car assembler.
The worst thing you could say to Elon.
Hugest insult.
It's I cannot imagine a worse, something that would hurt Elon Musk more than that. Number one, because he values being a manufacturer. But number two, there is just the faintest kernel of truth to that statement because Tesla is modeled after these consumer electronics companies.
Car assembler, them's fighting words.
I know. I would never say it to his face.
And don't call me a car assembler either. But I got to say, Elon doesn't even want the cars really to be about the hardware. They're all about the software, which is what is really the other big dig, right? It's no, I'm some great, brilliant, technologist. And so I suppose that's what really is part of what's got him calling Navarro truly a moron and dumber than a sack of bricks. Okay, so Nancy, we've established that he's warring with Peter Navarro. Who are his other big enemies, as you understand it, there in and around that White House?
I mean, I think he's made everyone mad. We don't need to name names. I think you could just say, the waterfront of top White House aides have been annoyed by Elon or gotten into it with him or been disappointed by his lack of message discipline or how he's gone and done things with Doge that they didn't know about ahead of time. I mean, it has just been a problem and people have been fearful to say anything. And I think that, what's happening with Navarro and Musk, it's interesting. Navarro is one of the most people who goes from 0 to 100 faster than anyone I've ever seen. In the first Trump term, he really got into it with Republicans on Capitol Hill. They hated him. People in the White House hated him. But he went to jail for 4 months for defying a subpoena. And you cannot underestimate in Trump's mind how much that demonstrated his loyalty and the currency that he has in the West Wing because of that. I think Peter Navarro is at the apex of his power right now. Whether that lasts, we'll see. But with these tariffs, he's really at a height of power. And for Elon to be picking a fight with him, it is just not good for Elon.
I gotcha. No, that's fantastic stuff. I had forgotten about that time in jail he did. So let me ask you this, though. Are you saying that your sense is that loyalty, that I'm willing to spend time in the clink loyalty is worth more to Trump than Elon Musk's money?
I mean, I wouldn't put it that way, but I just say Musk is messing with someone who in Trump's mind is just on this high perch because of the jail time. And it's just probably not a good fight to pick. Now, is Trump going to exile Elon? Nope, because he wants that money for the midterms. Republicans will need that money for the midterms. But I think that my sense is that I think Trump's inner circle hopes that Elon, just goes away after, May or June, late May or June. He can still be a friend of the White House. He'll still be able to come into the West Wing, maybe once or twice a week. He'll show up at Mar-a-Lago. No one thinks he's going away. Doge is there to stay. They're going to stay in the agencies. But I think that people are hoping maybe Doge is like less of a lightning rod for Democrats if Musk himself is not like jumping up on stage all the time or with Trump all the time or at Mar-a-Lago, sort of like in this buddy cop movie.
I totally agree. I think it's not that Musk is not going to be in Trump's orbit or whatever. It's just like a way that they can mutually take a step away from one another. I will say this Wisconsin race, I don't think you'd be right to blame Elon Musk for losing the race.
Well, Elon Musk is, you can extract that variable from the whole picture. The Dems still win.
I don't think we would be surprised if the Dems had won, even without Elon Musk being such a factor.
10 percentage points.
But listen, it's a low turnout election, and
okay.
There are historical examples like this where the candidate who just lost the presidency overperforms in a special election.
But I'm distracting you.
But my point
is
Nancy's right. Elon's big value to Trump is the midterm, is putting, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars into midterm elections and then using the threat of that to intimidate other Republicans into kind of falling in line. We just saw Elon Musk put a huge amount of money, basically press the button as hard as he could for the Republican candidate. And nothing happened, right? That's the best case scenario.
I mean, nothing. I think something happened. I think he drove voters the other way.
Maybe he even made it worse. And so, the value of Elon Musk's presence is probably lower than it has been at any point because we're seeing Musk create all of these scandals. He goes on Twitter and makes a Nazi joke, right? that wasn't on, Susie Wiles' plan for the week or whatever. And his money just is not moving the needle, or maybe is moving the needle in the wrong direction. So there are reasons why somebody like Navarro would feel comfortable going on TV and saying something that is not 100% laudatory of Elon Musk, or privately, maybe you're seeing people in Trump's inner circle starting to let things slip about how they truly feel.
I think originally with Doge, Elon was the public face of Doge, and he was the buffer, he absorbed the blast radius, right? So as people got upset about Doge, as government workers and lawsuits were filed, Elon absorbed the blast. But now his brand is so toxic nationally that it's no longer an asset to have him so closely aligned. And you saw that in Wisconsin, and you saw that this weekend where there were massive protests, not just in New York City, but in Utah
everywhere.
And Montana and in red states of people protesting Trump and Musk. I mean, so many of the signs that people were carrying were about Musk and about Doge, and that's got to have impact because they're seeing now we thought we were going to waltz into the midterms with all of this advantage and that we were going to have delivered all this stuff for the American people. And you're also seeing Kimball Musk, Elon's younger brother,
he was protesting this past weekend.
No, I'm sorry. Oh. I meant also chiming in about how the tariffs are a bad idea, and Bill Ackman. I mean, all the billionaires are not happy about this trade war.
No, the billionaires aren't. But I mean, I don't know. I do feel though, Max, it is pretty insane that while Ackman's out there and Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan started to make some comments, and the Stan Druckenmillers and others are saying things. Man, I don't know that anyone's making a bigger fuss about the tariffs than Elon Musk, than the first buddy. And if you think about it, that's kind of crazy.
I mean, I don't think that's totally true. There are lots of people who are mad about the tariffs.
No. I'm sorry. I misspoke. Yeah. Of major CEOs of major American companies Or, and actually forget about Ackman and Druckenmiller because they're not really CEOs of major American companies. I mean, Jamie Dimon said some words yesterday. They weren't exactly fighting words. I mean, Elon Musk is calling the chief architect of these tariffs a moron and dumber than a sack of bricks.
Right, but David, that's because he was insulted.
That's just
like,
normal feud stuff, David.
You've got to wind it back. Like, that's like because if Navarro hadn't said what he said about Tesla being an assembly maker, I don't think.
Oh my God!
So let's wind. Okay, let's wind it back.
Is investigating that for terrorism, actually.
Right, but let's wind it back before then. The car assembler comment. What had Musk said to prompt Navarro to say that? What Musk had been saying was these tariffs are a crap idea.
No, he had very gently criticized it. He had said Tesla had written a letter, not from Elon Musk, but from the company, just warning about retaliation, which is not exactly the same thing as saying the tariffs are bad. And Musk had in response to some stories maybe 2 weeks ago, essentially saying that Tesla was the best positioned automaker, basically a reply tweet that said, "We are not unaffected." So he had pushed back, but like he was not. The Navarro thing is what has been the real spark. I want to just say, to the point about protests, it's not just nationwide protests. He has also lost the gamers. So he went on a live stream recently in the last couple of days, and I guess now I'm reading this in a blog called Futurism, so perhaps they're cherry picking quotes, but there are a lot of quotes from these gamers on Elon Musk's own live stream that were very negative. People, saying he had no friends, siding with his estranged daughter, just kind of an ugly scene, even in a domain where Elon Musk, might otherwise expect to have mastery.
He's losing friends and allies everywhere right now as we speak. I will note, though, Nancy, that, and I'm going to bring this up in large part to try to refute Max and Dana here, who are feuding with me right now. Senator Ted Cruz yesterday imploring President Donald Trump to listen to the better angel perched on his shoulder, that being Elon Musk. Does Musk actually have the president's ear on this topic right now? I mean, certainly looking at the facts, looking at the things that are coming out of Trump's mouth and the things he's doing, the answer would seem to be no. But is there any kind of line of communication on this one issue?
I mean, Musk spends so much time with Trump and, has his cell phone and, talks to him all the time. But my reporting shows that, he's not in these final meetings about the tariffs. That group is there was a dinner at Mar-a-Lago the Friday night before they put out the tariffs. I'm losing track of time. I guess this was last week.
We all are. We're in Trump time now.
Right. We're in Trump time. But Lutnick was there. Howard Lutnick, for instance, the Commerce Secretary. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, was there. I have no reporting that suggests Elon Musk was there at that dinner or in these final White House meetings about what they should do about the tariffs. And granted, this was a contentious issue and there was differing views among Trump's economic aides. Elon Musk was not in those meetings. And so, of course, he has influence. One Trump person told me, he will always have influence. He will always be able to access the West Wing. He will always be able to call Trump. Trump is impressed by the fact that he's a billionaire, loves that brand name support. But no, he was not in the core group of people deciding what the tariffs were going to look like and going back and forth on that.
I wonder how this would be playing out if Tesla were doing a little bit better, if they weren't having these serious demand challenges, if the stock hadn't fallen by 50%. Elon Musk had lots of opportunity during the campaign to you go back and listen to those X spaces he had. He didn't bring up the tariffs as a potential point of contention. I'm not sure if he even saw them as a potential point of contention back then. And
do you think that's because he didn't think they were going to be a big issue, or he too was blindsided by the nature of these tariffs?
I think it's a combination of him, like many business leaders, sort of not expecting Trump to take such a hard line here, expecting what basically Trump 1.0, the kind of more restrained version of Donald Trump. And I think it's also that he just felt like he was in a position of much greater strength. I mean, his position has just gotten so much weaker over the past few months. And Tesla's market value, you look at the demand, you look at these protests, like he is just under threat in a way that I don't think he anticipated. I think he thought that this was going to go a lot differently than it has gone.
And also, I'll just chime in. Like, I also think Trump has changed as a leader since he was president the first time. I think he is more self-assured. He cares a lot less what people think and a lot less like what the world thinks. You know, he used to view the stock market as a barometer, like almost like a approval rating poll. I don't think he cares that much anymore. You know, he's not running for re-election. I just think he's like much more confident making decisions and letting the chips fall where they may. And also, I think he's interested in a very small group of people's opinions. You know, donors and Wall Street people are largely freaking out about the tariffs. And I talked to one person yesterday who was like, yeah, donors could call him, but there's like a very small circle of people who he would actually listen to on this. And I'm just not sure he would listen to Elon.
Well, no, he's not so far. Listen, I wanted to ask this because Doge briefly came up here, and I'm wondering, Nancy, what of Doge? As I've been asking periodically the last few weeks, it's from afar, it seems to be petering out a little bit and losing momentum. Is that true, or is it just going on and beavering away and doing its thing?
What do you mean? What do you mean petering out and losing momentum? Like federal workers are still getting fired.
Like what are the savings? I thought the saving, they had $100 billion they were reporting in savings in the first 2 weeks. What's that number up to now?
You know, I'm not tracking that closely, like what the savings are, but I will say Doge is not going anywhere. And people in the White House have made that clear to me. So there are still Doge people embedded in tons of the agencies. They're still doing work to sort of, you know, they say make the tech systems more efficient, but also to find savings. They just put out another email at some agencies, and then other people at other agencies are getting it, sort of offering like the second fork in the road, bigger buyout packages. I think more federal employees are thinking about taking it. So Doge lives on, and I think will live past Elon. It just may not have sort of the controversial front man that it had before, but there are other people in the administration who want to shrink the size of the federal government, like Russ Vought, who's the head of the OMB. Like, he doesn't necessarily like the way that Elon's gone about doing it, but there are other people in the Trump orbit who are interested in cutting the government way down.
So it's like a dessert fork or a fish fork instead of the main course fork.
Nancy, do you think that the tariff dispute is going to be like the undoing between Musk and Trump, or was it already sort of underway post-Wisconsin?
I think it was already fraying. This is just another data point.
Max, Dana, Nancy, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Anna Masarakis is our editor, and Rayhan Harmansi, our senior editor. The idea for this very show also came from Rayhan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and Dave Purcell fact-checks. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks to our supporters Joel Weber and Brad Stone. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.